us to be better parents, to be intentional parents, to be parents who are deliberate, to be parents who know that we are raising nations. Lord, always, whenever we are, going overboard, Father, not just bring counsel our way so that we will do that which only pleases you. And at the end of the day, when we are yet to give account, Lord God Almighty, we will say a job well done unto us. We cover this meeting with your precious blood. Come and have your way. May your name be glorified in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Okay, quickly. Some housekeeping. Just tell us where you're tuning in from, your name, and where you're tuning in from, and if this is your first time or you've been here on the call with us all through the 4 weeks. I'll start with a name I don't know. Lady B. Hello, Lady B. Good evening. Can you introduce yourself, where you're tuning in from, your name,
Okay.
the location?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
From Port Harcourt. I'm Blessing Wokoma from Port Harcourt. Well, actually, I missed the first week. The second week I was on. Then last week, I was distracted. So at a point, I left and I'm here today. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing. So have you, the sessions you joined, did you learn anything? Was it insightful for you? Is there
Yes.
anything outstanding you learned?
I learned a lot, especially the sex education. Although I do that, I already talked to my kids about that. But after the lectures, I saw some things I was not doing. And it's really nice. Yeah.
Okay, we're glad to hear that. Next person will be Gloria. Gloria, can you tell us, where you're tuning in from, and if this has been helpful to you, what you have learned? Okay, Gloria is not here. Okay, Becky, please tell us.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Becky Aja. I'm calling in from Abuja, and I've been following this parenting workshop right from the first session till now. And I've really learned a lot. It's been insightful. All the speakers have been spitting fire. They've been speaking. I can't even pick out one that I will say I enjoyed the most. All of them have been hot back to back. So what I've learned a better way to train up children. The different areas I need to train up my children in character, integrity, contentment. I've learned a lot. Like if I start talking, maybe I'll take the place of the speaker.
That's good to hear. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll just jump right into the session. As I said, our speaker is someone someone I admire a lot. She's been to one of our We Connect, and it was, in fact, when you see her and when you see her on Instagram does not do justice to her person. She's very simple but very loaded. So I'll just go ahead and read out her short profile. Dr. Gbonjubola Abiri is a consultant psychiatrist, managerial psychologist, professional speaker, and the medical director of Tranquil and Quest. She recently pioneered Nigeria's first one-of-a-kind mental health advocacy digital network, Mental Health TV with Dr. G, on YouTube. In this interview with Yetunde Oladeyinde, the lady who is a fellow of the West African College of Physicians, a member of Nigerian Medical Association, the Employee Assistant Professional Association, and the American Psychiatry Association. She takes you into her world. Thank you so much, Doc, for joining us this evening. Thank you for allowing yourself to be used by God, because I see that this is an opportunity to educate people. I mean, I've shared a couple of her work on WiCare, and she has a popular saying on Instagram: "There's no health without mental health." I've followed her for more than, I would say, 3 years, and she's been consistent. And this evening, she's going to talk to us about the emotionally intelligent parent. And as we go, it will be a conversational kind of session as we ask her questions. Get your questions ready. You can DM them to me, or you can keep them. So you can post them in the comment section. As we progress, she'll be able to answer as many questions as regards mental health, childhood traumas. What are the things that we didn't even realize were there? She's going to be able to tell us all about emotions. So, Doc, you're very welcome. We're pleased to have you again. You can have the floor. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for having me. Diane, please, I'd like to share my screen. If you could enable me to share my screen, please.
Okay, let me see if I could do that.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Right. Are the slides showing?
Yes, they are.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for having me here this evening. Thank you, Diane, for sending me the reminder earlier. I had honestly totally forgotten. And so most likely I would have been at dinner. I'd have been at dinner now where you call me and I'll say, oh my God. I actually had this presentation to get to. Anyways, I'm hoping I can still make dinner. Right. So good evening, everyone, from me here in Lagos to everyone joining us all over the country and possibly all over the world. I'd like to welcome you all to the last and final conversation, at least for now, on the parenting series. And I'll be talking to us about the emotionally intelligent parents. Emotional intelligence is a word that we throw around rather loosely. Many of us are not quite aware of it. In fact, the first time I came to the realization of the word emotional intelligence, I was talking with a friend and it was like, Gbonju, have you heard of this concept called emotional intelligence? And I was like, no, I haven't. Tell me about it. That must have been like 6 years ago. And I was like, so what's so fantastic about emotional intelligence? And it was like, that, it's like being a god and having the remote control of people in your hand, that once you are emotionally intelligent, you can ask anybody to do anything and they will do it. They'll be at your beck and call. And I'm like, wow, interesting. And so that had led me to, of course, my own work where I deal with patients. I work with patients, see different emotions, but I've also read quite a lot. And even when I say quite a lot, I haven't scratched the surface. I think I've read about 3 books on emotional intelligence. But every time I see a topic on the concept of emotional intelligence, I want to know more. Largely because you never stop learning, but because when you also know better, you can do better. If you don't know better, people would play and toy with you and your emotions. And you'll find that, again, like my friend said, it's like, people have, your remote controls pretty much in their hands. And so let's get right into today's topic, the emotionally intelligent parents. When we're done with the conversation, I want us to be able to use this knowledge to learn how this information helps you develop greater self-awareness, to learn how to choose to respond over automatically reacting or responding. Learn how to discover what your emotions are communicating, because our emotions are messengers. Overall, I want us to learn how to manage emotions, understand our children's temperament, understand childhood trauma and its impact, and learn how to become more emotionally intelligent. And so I like us to look at this flower growing out from pretty much nothing. But even in the midst of pretty much nothing, we can see life still coming through. And that's what emotions and life are like. If you had a life without emotions, imagine that your dominant emotion every day was happiness, 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 happiness. And so that's like, what do you want to eat today? Bread. Tomorrow, bread. Next tomorrow, bread. It will get boring after a while. And it pretty much won't be life, because it's the same thing day in, day out. And so life without emotions would be like an engine without petrol in it. And an engine without petrol is not going to go anywhere. It can't move. At least we don't have electricity-enabled cars in Nigeria just yet. Maybe if we did, we would say that the cars will move. But imagine a life without emotions, any form of emotions. It will be so bland, so boring, and so dry, like we like to say. And so emotions are critical, and we must pay attention to our emotions. What then are emotions, you might ask? And the simple definition that I have is that emotions are energy in motion. And so whether that your energy is positive, negative, whether that your energy is adaptive or maladaptive at the point in time, and whether you like to call the emotions happy, sad, anger, fear, shame, disgust, it is a form of energy in motion, going from place to place. And so that's what emotions are, energy in motion. So emotion, the simple definition is energy for the E, in motion. And so you decide what kind of energy it is that you're deriving at the end of the day. But you see, when we say that, for instance, I look at you and I say, oh, you look beautiful tonight, and you smile. We often think that what happens is a very simple, somebody said something and I reacted. But we must know that emotions are complex. Beyond the stimulus, which starts off the emotion, what we find is that emotions are a complex experience. It's not so simple. It's not as simple as we see it, or as we see the stimulus and the response. Between the stimulus and the response is a lot of processes in between. And so emotions are also described as a complex experience of consciousness, bodily sensation, and behavior that reflects the importance of something, an event, or a situation to us. And so many times we find that when we are reacting, when we are giving out a certain form of emotion, it is in response to an event, a situation, a place, or a thing. And we're almost often, conscious about what's going on. There's something going on in our bodies, and at the end of the day, a behavior ensues at the end of the day. So let's look at the next slide. And the next slide has us looking at what brings on emotions. Before an emotion starts off, like I said, there's a stimulus. And that stimulus is the trigger. When the trigger comes on, what the human brain does when it sees a trigger. So I'll give you an instance. If, for instance, you had a friend who was unkind to you, and then you meet another person by the name of that friend, chances are when that person tells you, oh, my name is this, your mind goes back to that friend of yours, and your mind will likely say, remember that this person, so and so in your life was negative to you. And so the trigger was that person. How you look at the situation is your appraisal of the situation. After a while, your body has responses, which is known as physiological response. And so whether your heart is beating faster, whether your heart is beating slower, whether you have butterflies in your tummy or your head is, todding and turning, whether your eyes are feeling dizzy, there's a response that your body gives. And at the end of the day, we find a behavior that accompanies what that emotion is able to signal in your body. And so I say to us, what are the principles of emotions? We must know that emotions are not a wasted effort. Emotions have a job. Emotions are messengers. They are messengers and indicators that create an urge for you to do something. And so, for instance, if you listen to a message and at the end of the day, you wanted to give your life to Christ, that's a messenger, an indicator that wants you to do something at the end of the day. If your child did something wrong and you corrected them and they did it again, you find that it is a messenger telling you that, do you want to punish or do you just want to correct and let them go? So emotions, when they happen, again, whether they be positive or negative, adaptive or maladaptive, will urge you at the end of the day to get something done. Once in a while, we can turn off our emotions, but is it possible to turn them all off? It's a critical question that we need to ask ourselves. And that takes us back to the beginning, that life without emotions is like an engine without fuel. Regardless of how you feel, even though you might say, oh, I don't feel any emotions, I don't feel anything towards that person. Even that nothing that you feel is an emotion. You just haven't been able to put a name to what it is that you're feeling. We must realize that emotions are physical and that they are controlled by our brain's unconscious process. And so when I say that, what I mean is that while emotions can be conscious, a lot of the things that have us interpreting our emotions are unconscious things that have happened to us before. And so again, our brain sees a trigger, but it appraises the situation based on our previous experiences that have happened to us before. Emotions are not always based on reality. Many times it's not about what is going on. Sorry about that. But on subjective mental experience, what your mind tells you about that situation or what you have learned over time and how you have learned to deal with it. Emotions, last but not the least, are reactions to a belief, a thought, or interpretation. So if you look at all of this, you see that emotions don't just happen. It's a complex system. It's a complex, well thought out system by your body, even though you might not know that a lot of work is going on. And so emotions don't just happen. It's not just that, oh, he said this to me and I was angry and I slapped him. Was there something you could have done between what you heard and what you did? Definitely. Yes, you had a trigger that was negative, but how you appraised it set off a number of physiological experiences or emotions in your body. And what you told yourself about that situation is what now made you decide to act in a certain way. And so the reason why somebody will say to you, oh, you are ugly, and you raise your hand to slap the person is the same reason why somebody may say to me, oh, you're ugly. And I'll say, wow, right. Tell me who I look like if you think that I'm ugly. And so one thing I want us to, take away from this session today is that we are in control of our emotions. It can be hard. It can be tough, it can be difficult, but it can be learned and it is not impossible. And so let's look at what then emotional intelligence is. Because now we've laid the background for what emotions are. Emotions are energy, emotions are conscious processes. Emotions are based on our subjective experience, not necessarily reality. Emotions are messengers. Emotional intelligence, for someone to be intelligent, intelligence has to do with learning from past experiences so that you can use that situation or that opportunity for something in the future. And so for you to say that someone is emotionally intelligent, it means that this individual is able to learn from past experiences and put it into practicality, into future situations. And so when I say that an individual is emotionally intelligent or that I am emotionally intelligent, it is the ability of an individual to identify, evaluate, and manage emotions in themselves and then in other people. Quite a number of times people think that I'm already 40 something, I'm not emotionally intelligent. Whenever will I become emotionally intelligent? But I'm happy to say to you this evening that no one fully has it all. No one was fully emotionally intelligent. No one is able to say that, oh, I have a full bouquet of knowledge about emotional intelligence. And that's why someone like me will tell you that, oh, I'm still reading. I'm still learning to be better. I'm still looking for all the knowledge that I can get on emotional intelligence. It's an active process. So please do not think that all hope is lost. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry about that. And so what we find is that emotional intelligence, you must know that it's about two things and about two groups of people. One, about yourself. Two, about other people. About yourself, meaning you are able to identify, evaluate, and manage your own emotions, and that you are also able to identify, evaluate, and manage emotions in other people as well. And so what then are the components of emotional intelligence, you might ask? There are four major aspects of emotional intelligence. And so for this evening, our course will be pretty much like a crash course. Because beyond introducing you into what emotional intelligence is, I also want to spark your curiosity and encourage you to find out more information by reading and learning and being willing to learn. And so the key principles of emotional intelligence are: one, self-awareness. One of the greatest philosophers of all time is called Socrates, and Socrates says something: man, woman, know thyself. Because it is in the knowing of yourself that the best can emerge. If you don't know yourself, you are pretty much like a city without walls, no boundaries. And so you are prone to attack, including by yourself and by other people. And so emotional intelligence is your ability to recognize your emotions, what you are feeling per time, understand your emotional triggers and your limitations as well. And so you can ask yourself the question: what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? What is making me feel this way? What can make me feel better? That is called a check-in. And every once in a while, we encourage that you do a check-in. Check in with yourself. Be able to ask yourself questions, open, fearless, and honest questions. If you can't be true with yourself, you can't be true with anyone else. So please start with yourself. Identify your emotions, your emotional triggers, and your limitations. And so part of what self-awareness also teaches is that you must be able to do what is called a SWOT analysis: a strength, weakness, opportunities, and threat analysis. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What opportunities are available to me regardless of how difficult the situation is? And last but not the least, what are the threats to my life at present? The second thing is that as an individual, to be emotionally intelligent, you need to be able to self-regulate. And self-regulation has to do with the ability to manage emotions, your own emotions, again, the self, so that they do not have a negative effect on you. Sometimes we have certain emotions such as anger, such as hate, such as shame, such as despair. And quite often, we often think that, what am I going to do with this emotion? But many times you can also learn how to positively use those emotions. You know, there are people who have gone through traumatic experiences and it didn't drag them down. It's not easy, but they decided that I will not let this pain, drag me down. I will decide to turn this pain into purpose. Pain, of course, is a negative experience, but turning pain into purpose takes a lot of determination, a lot of grit, a lot of hard work, and a lot of perseverance, regardless of how difficult things are. So being able to manage our emotions in such a way that they do not have a negative effect is self-regulation. Very related to that is motivation, an inner drive that encourages us to have personal joy after an accomplishment. If there's something that we don't do quite a lot of, it is that we don't thank ourselves a lot. We need to be able to motivate ourselves. Get an inner drive. Tell yourself you have done well. Pat yourself on the back. It's a key function of emotional intelligence. There's also empathy. And we say this quite a lot. Oh, that person doesn't have empathy. That person was not empathetic towards me. Is that person sympathetic or empathetic? But unlike sympathy, empathy is the ability to recognize, understand, and experience the emotions of another person. And so if you were looking for the difference between empathy and sympathy, it is that the person who is sympathetic is most likely going to break down and cry. But the empathetic person is able to support after feeling the emotions of that individual and hold their hand to help them become better. The last thing about emotional intelligence is having social skills. And social skills have to do with the ability to interact and negotiate with other individuals in order to find the best way to meet the needs of each person. No man is an island. And so we need to be able to understand other people, understand their silence, understand when they're speaking, understand when they want to be left alone. And so this can, of course, be difficult with children, because children are different. You know, a number of times parents will say that at least all of you came from the same father and mother. How come you're different? We are all different. And that's the reason why, you know, we must look at why emotional intelligence is important. Emotional intelligence helps us to think intelligently about our emotions and how our emotions can impact on our thoughts and our behavior. In psychology, we often talk about what is known as triad, the negative triad, the fact that our thoughts influence our feelings and our feelings influence our behavior. If we are able to think happy thoughts, it would influence what we believe or what we feel. And eventually that would impact on our behavior as well. If we are emotionally intelligent, it would help us to define the use of our words. And so, like I said, it's a work in progress. There are days that I picked up my phone before and I was sending a text message to somebody and I'm like, you know, you can actually, you know, take that down, like a reel would say on Instagram, take that down and say it in a more socially acceptable way that will still pass the message across without making the person feel bad or in a negative light. Sometimes it's the tone of our voice. And I'll give an example with children. And many times the things that children do, they learn from us. When there was a time that I'll say to my children, go and bring this thing here. And they'll go there and the thing will be right in front of their eyes. And they'll say, Mommy, I can't see it. And I'll say, open your eyes. It's right there in front of you. And so one day I was looking for something. And I was asking my daughter, do you know what this thing? Have you seen this thing? You know what she told me? She said, Mommy, open your eyes. Of course, at that point, I was lost. I'm like, well, so this is what I said. Again, instead of saying, oh yeah, open your eyes, open your eyes. You know, all those kind of things that parents say, oh, do you have, the other people that know it, you have two heads. We need to be kind with our words and how it is that we say it. Sometimes your children will not even understand your local language, but the tone with which you say it communicates something to them. And so our emotional intelligence will help us define our use of words and our tone of voice. You know, sometimes your kid will tell you something, Mom, something happened in school today. You say, hey, what? That kind of child is likely to say, I haven't even told this person is almost already roaring. But of course, if you're subtle about it and you're like, oh, right, what happened? What would you like to tell me? And the child then opens their mouth to tell you. It helps us to define our body language, our stance, how we react and respond. Either we're downcast or we look like we are up to the task. And then, of course, it tells on our facial expressions. Our emotions show on our face, especially for those of us who wear our emotions on our sleeves. And so emotional intelligence is important because without even saying anything, many times you have communicated language. You have communicated displeasure, anger, you have communicated disgust, even when somebody looks at your face and you haven't even opened your mouth just yet. What then is temperament? Understanding our children's temperament, of course, is extremely important because it then helps you to identify that each person is unique and different, and their responses to different things will happen over time. Temperament is the way that children respond to the world. Even as adults, there are ways that we respond to the world. We respond at different levels. But in children, it's important that we look at how they respond to temperaments on these different levels. The first is activity level. There's some children that they will say that once you put them to bed like this, until the next morning, you know, this child will not wake up to eat, will not wake up to do anything. But there's some that if you don't sleep beside them, touch them, hold them, hug them, they won't go to bed. There's some that they will be the ones to put you to bed because after they put you to bed, they're still up and down roaming around the house. You need to be able to understand the activity level of your child, whether they are awake or they are asleep. The next one is that we need to be able to look at what the regularity is. How regularly do they sleep? How regularly does this child eat? How regularly does this child like to play? Put a pattern to what the child does at every point in time. You also want to look at the adaptability of the child. Is this child adaptable? Or does this child struggle when situations change? Like, oh, if I change him from one food to another, how well does he change? If I change him from one school to another, how well does this child react and respond to change? We need to pay attention to those things. We need to look at how easily our children can be distracted. And this is especially important because we currently live in a jet age where we're giving a lot of devices to children. A lot of devices have been noticed to reduce children's attention span. And so we must create boundaries with devices, create boundaries, very tough boundaries with devices. Otherwise, we'll just find out that our children will have the attention span of worse than a goldfish. It's already affecting us as adults, and if we're not careful, it will start to affect us as our children as well. The next thing is that we must look at how sensitive our children are. Some children are more sensitive than the others. Some are sensitive to touch, some are sensitive to light, some are sensitive to sound. I remember taking my children to a party once, and when we got to the party, my son just blocked his ears and he started screaming that the music was too loud. And so this is a child that when he was younger too, if he didn't find a piece of cloth to cover his face, he will not sleep. If he wants to sleep at night, if he doesn't have somebody touching his body, he won't sleep. We need to pay attention. They may seem like little things, but those little things are a lot. Sometimes we want to see what their persistence level is. Persistence, how persistent they are when they're asking for things, when they're requesting rather for things. Then we want to see how intense they are as children. Are they intense? Which is the level of their emotional response. Do they cry excessively? Do they shout excessively? Are they cranky? Or are they understanding? We need to understand that. We also need to look at how approachable they are. Some children are not friendly and they don't hide it. Some are friendly. Some also would, be friendly in certain environments or in certain places or with certain people. It's all of these things that we must pay attention to. And then we must pay attention to the mood, because all of these things form the foundation for which we will see later in life. How is their mood? Do they almost look happy? Do they almost always look sad? One important thing that I must say here is that even after realizing and recognizing the temperaments of children from a young age, it can change. It can change when children are exposed to certain situations, certain people, or certain places that they don't like. And so as parents or as caregivers, we must continue to work hard and pay attention to these signs. Here I'll be speaking to us about what we refer to as adverse childhood experiences. The one that we're more common or more familiar with is child abuse. And so we usually just talk about, child abuse. And we talk about, physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and the works. But one that is much more deeper is what is known as adverse childhood experiences. And it talks about experiences that some children, and many children experience in environments where they're growing up. The first, again, and so we might see an overlap in what is found in child abuse and adverse childhood experiences. And so there's physical abuse, again, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, mental illness of a household member. And so if one or both partners, maybe a father or a mother, or even a relative living with them, is mentally ill, it's an adverse childhood experience for that child. If one or the other partner or both of the partners are drinking alcohol, it's a problem. It's an adverse childhood experience for that child, meaning that the child is being exposed to a negative event that shouldn't necessarily happen. If you have an individual using illegal street or prescription substances, cigarettes, prescription medication, marijuana, to mention but a few, it's also an adverse childhood experience for that child. Divorce or separation of parents, or even loss of a parent, is an adverse childhood experience for a child. If there's domestic violence between adults in the household, It's an adverse childhood experience for a child. And if one of the partners or both of the partners have been arrested or is currently in jail, that's also an adverse childhood experience for children. And so what these adverse childhood experiences do, like we would often see in child abuse, is that they have an impact on the child, not just in that young age, but even at other ends of their lives. And so this exposure to adverse childhood experiences, to stress or to trauma, is often linked to poor physical and mental health, chronic disease. The child is likely to struggle in school, have lower economic success, and when they do grow up, they will struggle with finding and staying in relationships. So it's not just about now, it's about a future that if we're not careful, all of the things that form the foundation for the child will continue to impact negatively in future. What are some of the emotions that are associated with trauma? When trauma happens, especially to, children from a trusted individual. And, it's important to note that a lot of the trauma that happens to children happens from people who are meant to protect them, who are in their immediate environment, and who are supposed to give them the best of care. The emotions associated with trauma include shame, anger, sadness, anxiety, guilt, and hate. And so these emotions can show up in different ways. The children can start feeling ashamed and not, comfortable with their mates. They may be angry and show the anger in different ways, including being defiant, not listening to authority. Sometimes it's sadness. You just notice that the child is overly sad, withdrawn, keeping to self. Sometimes it's anxiety. They're fidgeting. They're unsure of whether they would get something right or get it wrong. Sometimes the child feels guilty. And many times guilt comes when, parents divorce or parents become separated and the child keeps asking questions. Was it me? Was it something I did? Was it something I said? Sometimes it is the emotion of hate. And hate can come when any of the adverse childhood experiences, again, happen to a child. So all of the traumatic experiences mentioned in adverse childhood experiences can cause some of the emotions that we have explained here. Why do we need emotions? So we're going back to emotions. We need emotions because they help us act quickly with minimal conscious awareness. Again, they would respond to what they hear. The body will respond based many times on past experiences rather than the current reality. Emotions help us to prepare the body for immediate action. They influence our thoughts and, of course, motivate our future behaviors. And they would state how we would also react in certain situations. And so emotions are extremely important and should be given the attention that they deserve. How can we improve emotional intelligence? The first thing that I said earlier on was that we must know ourselves. God has entrusted you with yourself. Give yourself priority, know yourself, understand yourself, do a regular check-in with yourself. And so one here says, pay attention to your feelings. Be able to tell yourself at every point in time, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? How am I feeling? How long have I been feeling this way? Do a stock of your emotional SWOT, which is checking in with yourself. If you work and you're under a lot of stress at work, look for ways to release workplace stress. Talk about it, prioritize your work, do your work on time, share your work with your colleagues, explain to your manager if you have difficulties. You must learn to think before making decisions. If you make decisions before thinking, that means you're impulsive and you need to, clean up the mess that you may have created. Listen to what others have to say. The reason why God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth is so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. So listen, and listen in a kind, compassionate, and non-judgmental manner. Pay attention to non-verbal communication. Again, whether somebody says something with their mouth or they say something with their attitude, they are saying something. Be able to read people's body language and body gestures. Being able to read people's body language and gestures comes with a lot of calmness and intentionality. And of course, you must be interested. You must work hard at developing yourself. The man who is not learning is the man who is dead. As long as you're alive, make efforts to read. Read a book, listen to a TED talk, attend seminars, attend webinars, listen to when people have something to say. We must learn to see things from another person's perspective. Yes, what you have to say is important. Yes, what you have to say might be the truth, but give an opportunity to somebody else to say something. You may learn something from what they're telling you. Even if you don't learn how to do it, you learn how not to do it wrongly. You must pay attention to how you respond to others. Sometimes you might be responding angrily, and then you need to ask yourself, what is wrong with me? Why am I responding in this way? What is going on with me? You must focus on what you love about your work or your environment, depending on where it is that you are. So focus on the things that bring you joy and happiness. Try at all times, even in the midst of difficulty, to maintain a positive attitude. Positivity drives growth. Remember that our thoughts influence our feelings or our beliefs, and our feelings and our beliefs influence our behavior. Last but not the least is that you must be patient with yourself and give yourself time to grow. It is a process, it's a work in progress. You must be kind to yourself as you give yourself time to grow. I'd like to thank you very much for listening and for being part of the session this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. Thank you. I'm sure a lot of us will ask for this slide eventually. Thank you so much. I have a few questions in my DM. So if you have more, please send. And I have some questions, to ask for myself. And one of the questions that I would ask is, so for a child let me start with the question about teenagers. So for a teenager who is defiant or rebellious or going through the motion or the whatever it is that happens during the teenage years, can it be attributed to their temperament or to the things going on around them?
Okay. Well, so it's a mix. It's a mix of many things. So usually we always talk about the mix of nature and nurture. We always talk about the mix of nature and nurture. Again, since you've spoken about the temperaments, it could as well be the temperaments. And so you would see that some children don't just come up with a certain behavior or a certain attitude. We should always go back to the roots to see what is likely to be going on. You see, many times the defiant behavior is the fruits on a tree or the flowers on the tree. And so if you pluck that out, after a while, what happens? It grows back. We need to go back to find out what the roots are. So if it's not the temperament, it's also very important that we look at situations in the individual's environment. Has there been a sudden change? For instance, let me give you this example. A friend of mine was speaking to me this morning. He sent me a picture of his little child. I think she's less than 2. She put her hand behind her back yesterday. And that kind of stance, if you see it in a child, is a child who is being corrected. And so I said, oh, you're correcting her. And he was like, yeah, they were looking at her report card. I think she's about 2 now. They were looking at her report card and a lot of it was developing. And I was like, you need to go and ask the teacher questions. Is anything happening? How is she interacting in school? Has anything significant happened recently? And he said, oh, yes. That come to think of it, they just changed her class. Change. So that tells you that kind of child, you need to understand from that young age that the adaptability is fragile. And so once you try to change that child from what the child knows, what the child doesn't know, the child is likely to resist. A form of a resistance will happen. And so this, adolescence. So another thing is, of course, you need to also understand that the period of adolescence is often what we describe as identity role versus confusion. These adolescents are, trying to find out who they are. They're trying to fit in with friends. They're trying to, be or saw people. It's a difficult time for them. And so you as a parent want to understand what the challenges of that period of their lives is. If you don't understand, you just keep misinterpreting everything as bad behavior. But they can actually be going through difficult times. It's also very important that we highlight that usually that age of adolescence is also usually when most mental illnesses in adolescence starts before the age of 14. And so we must pay attention. We must pay attention, first of all, by being aware, by being informed, by, reading up. I'll send you something that I'd encourage, everyone here who is interested to read up, so that as children develop, we understand what each, growth time of their life tallies with, what we should expect and what we should be doing to support them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. Thank you for that awesome. I caught something from what you said. You talked about mental loneliness, right? That's what you called it. I didn't know there was a name for that phase of their life. So the other DM I have here is, she says, I know a friend whose dad left them when they were very young, and now she's always very sad and gets angry very easily. But I know in my heart that she's a nice person. Is there any way to help her?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last bit of the question. Could you please come again?
She's saying that she knows in her heart that this her friend is a very nice person. Is there any way to help this her friend?
Okay, so if I got you right, the friend is going through a difficult time at the moment.
No,
Is
her
that it?
dad.
Okay.
No. I'm sorry for the noise. I'm in motion. Her dad left them when they were very young, and she grew up. I'm sure maybe the question came from the previous explanation about adverse effects on divorce. So she's saying that her dad left them when they were growing up, and that since then, up until now that they are grown, her friend is always angry and always, very violent. So she's asking if there's anything if there's a way she can help her.
Right. Well, so thank you for that question. And I'm happy that at least we talked about adverse childhood experiences this evening and how they can have impact, not just as a child, but as an adult. I'd mentioned how that even as children, feel a lot of guilt. I remember seeing a patient a few weeks ago, and she told me how she was 8 years old and her sister was 6 years old, and their parents called them into the room and told them that they were going their separate ways. She remembers the day, she remembers how it happened. That's such a traumatic memory for a child. And so for your friend, I would say, try to listen to her. Try to understand, again, the anger, all that she's demonstrating as symptoms of something lurking underneath. Reach out to her. Try to explain that you have noticed certain things and that you would like very much if she confides in you or at least shares whatever it is that she may be going through. So one of the things that I always say, and I think that might answer a lot of questions for us this evening, is that I always talk about 4 L's. We must learn about conditions that affect people. So one of the things that you might want to read about is what is the impact of divorce in childhood on an adult. It can cause a lot of issues: irritability, anger issues, hostility issues, relationship problems. The person is not even able to form relationships, not willing to stay in relationships. It can cause depression, it can cause anxiety, it can cause substance abuse problems, a lot. And so learn about it, find out what's going on. You should listen intently, without judging, without bias, with kindness and compassion. So when your friend is talking and your friend says, oh, my dad left when we were 3 or when I was 7, don't start saying, oh, my own mother too left when I was. Listen because you want to listen. The other thing is, again, look out for symptoms. What exactly is going on with this individual? How are they struggling? How are they showing that they're struggling? And so the last thing that you want to do, because ordinary, you're not a professional, or at least you're not trained enough to be a professional. And so even when you get this gamut of problems, you may not be able to give solutions to them, is that you want to link this person with a source of support. Just tell them, I think that you will do well if you speak to someone. Talk to someone who is who might be able to take you through it. Again, we're not going to say that whatever that individual says is going to bring her father back or take her back to childhood. But therapy is about realizing that all that happened in the past was not your fault. But it's also your responsibility to move from where it is that you are to the life that you desire. Otherwise, you'd keep living, a life of hate for the rest of your life. Thank you.
All right, Doc. The questions are so many, so let me read. I don't know why they don't want to post it on the. Well, it's still okay. So this person says, my son was abused when he was very young. Okay, she says, my son was abused when he was very young. And sometimes I see him exhibit some sexual innuendos. Should I ignore them, or should something be done about them now? Does it mean sometimes it gets me? Okay, she says sometimes it gets me afraid. Hope he will not grow up and become a rapist.
Let's not hope. Let's do something about it. You've seen something, please do something. Something has happened, something has triggered something. You need to get help for that child. Get that child to speak to someone who is, a professional in such, matters. Otherwise, you see this problem that we're saying, oh, it's a child, you didn't know what happened. Or maybe it will get better. Maybe it won't. It will keep morphing into different forms. But if we give it some attention, we listen to how the child feels, what the child is going through, we're able to start to modify some reactions and some behaviors now. Otherwise, it will be a big problem if we just leave it and hope. Hope is not enough. Some action has to be put in place. Thank you.
Doc, the questions are so many.
It looks like we're going to.
Okay. This one says, my brother abused me as a young child. I just want to ask, is that the reason I do not want any man around me?
Well, it can be one of the reasons, and it can be a major reason. Again, many of these questions, we may not be able to just, use 1 minute to answer them. It may be something that you need to sit down, because one event can be enough, but one event can also be the trigger for many other events to happen, especially because, as we have seen and research shows, abuse can happen in clusters. And so beyond that one person, it's not impossible that something has happened with some other people. You get what I mean? So it has to be, we need to sit down. We need to listen to the full story, not just a glimpse of a picture. We need to understand and find out what the other factors are. And so what I would, recommend is that seeing a therapist will do you a world of good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Doc. Last question for the night so that we can release you to go for your party. She says, so how do I know I no longer have childhood traumas? From what you have said this evening, I've seen that I went through a lot as a child. My parents verbally abused me so much. Even though I think I have healed, but how can I really ascertain that I have healed? And then is it also okay to contact you after the session?
So how do I know that I have healed? You may not be the best judge to say whether or not you have healed, because you may not even know what to look out for. And so I always say that if there's been trauma, reach out to a therapist, sit with a therapist, discuss, and find out some areas of your life that it might be impacting on that you might not even know. And so many times people who have gone through, emotional or psychological abuse as children, what we find is that they have a low perception of themselves, low self-worth, poor self-confidence, self-esteem, which will be manifested in things like, pretty much being a rug that people walk over, being a people pleaser, wanting to have everybody be happy with them just because, they want to be validated. They need people to validate them. And so they may also settle for relationships that otherwise they should not be found in. And so it may not end with relationships. It may even, linger on to like opportunities. They just jump at any and every opportunity that comes to them. And so you may not be able to effectively say whether or not you've healed. And so the best judge would be other people who have looked at you. And it may also be, an individual who you see in therapy, in a professional setting. As to whether or not my services are available, Diane will be able to communicate that with you. I'm a consultant psychiatrist, like she said earlier, a professional therapist, and yes, I can be reached strictly on appointment basis. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Doc. Thank you for this awesome time. This chat room is quiet because everybody's their heads are full. Our heads are full, my goodness. So much to learn. It's almost like we've not even scratched the surface of emotional intelligence. Like we've just been rubbing it. We're just about to scratch the surface. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, Doc. Can you just say thank you to Doc in the comment section? I have learned so much. Something you said that resonated well with me is as regards divorce, adverse effects. Someone I know whose parents were divorced, she never ever wants to be in a relationship. I don't know if that has to do with a deficiency in adversity quotient. I don't know what to call it, but she's always running away from relationship. Like the moment she sees that, okay, I mean, she's had 2 divorces right now, so it's almost like, so when you just said unable to stick to relationships, I kind of made me think, so does that mean she needs therapy? Can she be helped? Because she seems pretty much a confident person as far as I'm concerned. She knows all these things. It's just, when you said it now, I'm beginning to think like, okay, so that I can at least talk to her to say, okay, maybe you need to talk to someone if she really does need them.
So, what I've come to learn and what I've come to realize is that until we're able to have open, honest, and fearless conversations and ask questions of ourselves, we may not be truly representing the things that we have gone through. And so what I'll tell you is that you also need to be careful that confidence is not her overcompensating for a low self-esteem. Some people seem like they have it all figured out, but again, it's like Emmanuel will say, "Don't be my real face with this." And so we need to be sure this person, has it all together. The divorces that she may have gone through are, likely due to trauma that she didn't heal from. And so there's something that we call the compulsion to repeat in psychology. Very simply explained as, if you have a child, male or female, who sees maybe his mother and father fighting and promises him or herself that, when I grow up, this will never be me. I will not lift my hand to touch anybody. I will not. But fast forward to the future, and this child starts to be the one that is violent in relationships. What has happened is that trauma stuck, that individual did not heal from that trauma. And what we're currently seeing is a compulsion to repeat the errors of the parents. And so if she's not seeing a therapist, again, she may tell you that she doesn't need a therapist, but just encourage her. Clearly, for her to have had not just one divorce, but another divorce shows that there's a problem with forming and maintaining relationships. She can be helped if she's willing to get help. Thank you.
Okay. One last one before you go. So this is also pertaining to relationships and maybe the choices we make in terms of picking maybe people we date, people we marry. So does it also can our relationships with our parents affect the choices we make in terms of choosing a spouse? Sometimes I think, I don't know, but I think that sometimes our choices are because of the parents we actually saw growing up. But majority of the time you say, oh, I'll never marry someone like my dad, I'll never marry someone like my mom. But you find yourself marrying someone exactly like that parent you didn't want to marry. How does that work? What exactly happens to us when we make this choice?
Okay, so what I would say is that many of the decisions that we make can be unconscious, and many times they're based on unconscious, unresolved issues that we have that we don't even realize that we have. Because your family is the first circle that you see and your first sphere of influence when you're growing up, it's often easy to pick out their errors and say, oh, I don't want to be like this, I will not be like this person, I will not be like, but pretty much like what I just reacted to, how it is that you must understand what it is that you're trying to avoid and deal with your own trauma, not carry on their own trauma. You lived with them, you stayed with them, they formed a vital part of your life. And so they would influence your choices. Even when you don't know that they're influencing your choices, they're influencing your choices. When you then decide to go extreme and say, I will not do this, I will not, what you find is that by the time you put yourself on the extreme, you are unfortunately attracting the kind of people that you previously had said that you didn't want. And so, a few days ago, I was speaking to someone and she was saying she doesn't need people in her life, she doesn't. So I hear that part. But what we're also finding is that you don't need people, you think that you can do it by yourself. But what we're also finding on the other end is that in a bid not to need people, in a bid to make it look like she can do all by herself, she's attracting very, very, very wrong people. And so I said to her that you need to be careful that in a bid not to, fuel that I don't need this person, you're also going to an extreme to attract the people that ordinarily you will not even be caught dead with. And so I said there's a dissonance. There's a dissonance between what you say you want and what you go out there to get. Again, unconscious, unresolved, and many times unidentified issues, which the individual may not be able to pick out themselves and may need, guidance through therapy sessions to discover.
Thank you so much. I would have asked one more question, but let me leave you maybe another time. Thank you so much, Doc. We appreciate you. Thank you for answering all our questions. Thank you for such an impactful session. We really appreciate. We hope that one of these days you will come and be with us again, come and talk to us in one of our meetings again. God bless you. And so everyone, we've come to the end of our month-long parenting workshop. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for being here and learning with us. God bless you and have a good night. Bye.